If you walk past a building that is just actively consumed by flames, the very first thing you notice isn't the fire itself.
Right, it's the commotion.
Exactly. It's the firefighters. I mean, they are absolutely everywhere. You've got guys smashing in the remaining windows with axes. They're tearing down drywall, flooding the floors with these massive high-pressure hoses.
It looks chaotic.
It looks completely destructive. And imagine, just for a second, that you had absolutely no concept of how fires worked or, what a fire department even was.
Like you're an alien just observing the scene.
Right. If you just stood on the sidewalk and watched that scene, you would almost certainly point at the people in the yellow coats and say, like, look at those maniacs destroying that building.
It's a fundamental error of observation, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, without the context of the invisible spark that actually started the blaze, the people wielding the axes look completely indistinguishable from vandals.
Yeah.
You basically mistake the response for the cause.
You would completely miss the frayed electrical wire sparking inside the wall or, the gas leak down in the basement. You just see the destruction, see the firefighters at the center of it, and just blame them for the whole disaster.
Which is exactly what we do with the human body.
Welcome back, everyone. If you've been with us on these deep dives, we've been systematically unlearning the standard medical narrative about the body supposedly attacking itself.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We've looked at healing the gut. We've explored lost cures. And today, we are bringing all of those threads together for the ultimate capstone synthesis.
The big picture.
Exactly. We have an incredibly dense stack of research in front of us today, pulling heavily from the foundational work of bioenergetic researchers.
Right. People like Peat, Feldman, and the researcher known as Haidut.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to look at autoimmunity exclusively through this bioenergetic lens. We are unpacking the profound reality that cellular energy, the literal microscopic power grids inside your cells, that dictates whether your body heals or whether it breaks down.
And doing that requires completely flipping the script on how we view chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
When you start analyzing the human body as a complex energy system rather than just a collection of isolated parts, the symptoms we label as an autoimmune disease, they stop looking like a biological mistake.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they start looking like a desperate, highly coordinated survival mechanism.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is a massive paradigm shift. What if your immune system isn't confused? What if it hasn't, gone rogue?
What if it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do?
Right. What if it's executing a perfectly logical response to clean up a metabolic disaster area? Because we really need to start by dismantling the mainstream myth here. I want to talk about molecular mimicry.
Ah, yes, the classic textbook theory.
Right, because if you go to a rheumatologist today with joint pain or a thyroid issue, the explanation they give you is that your immune system is basically experiencing a case of mistaken identity.
They tell you a virus or like a piece of gluten gets into your system.
Yeah, and because that foreign protein happens to look structurally similar to your own healthy tissue, your immune system just gets tricked. Like it gets confused, goes rogue, and starts assassinating your healthy cells.
That is the standard narrative, for sure. But the bioenergetic perspective, which is heavily supported by researchers like Koch and the immunologist Polly Matzinger, it reveals that this framing is entirely backwards.
Entirely backwards.
Yeah. Autoimmune conditions are not a case of mistaken identity. They are a direct response to systemic energy failure and severe structural damage.
Okay, so talk to me about Matzinger, because her work is fascinating here.
Matzinger proposed something called the danger model of immunity. And her research completely dismantled the old idea that immune cells are simply triggered by a binary recognition of self versus non-self.
Meaning they don't just blindly attack anything foreign.
Exactly. Instead, she showed that immune cells are triggered by damage signals.
So they aren't like Border Patrol agents just checking passports. They're actually responding to distress flares from the cells themselves.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But let's take that a step further, because there's another researcher in your sources, Cunliffe, who introduced the concept of morphostasis.
Morphostasis. Okay, what does that mean in this context?
Well, morphostasis implies that the primary overarching job of your immune system isn't actually to fight off invaders.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Its primary job is to maintain the proper form and function of the body. It's essentially a tissue maintenance and debris clearance system.
A cleanup crew.
Exactly. So when we see a swarm of autoantibodies clustered around an organ, say the thyroid or the joints, conventional medicine looks at that and assumes those antibodies are assassins hunting down healthy cells.
Because they're at the scene of the crime.
Right. But morphostasis suggests those autoantibodies are actually chemical tags. They're essentially post-it notes marking damaged, dying, or structurally compromised tissue that urgently needs to be cleared out so the body can repair itself.
Hold on, I need to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. If I go back to that firefighter analogy, you're saying the self versus non-self theory is like blaming the firefighters for the fire just because they're always standing around the burning building?
Yes, precisely.
The antibodies are the cleanup crew responding to a condemned structure, not the arsonist setting the fire.
That is the exact mechanism at play, and the experimental evidence for this is actually hiding in plain sight within vaccine research.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if you take an isolated antigen, like a dead virus or a foreign protein, and inject it into an animal, the immune system often just ignores it. It does not provoke a robust immune reaction at all.
Just injecting the protein isn't enough.
Right. To force the immune system to react to that protein, researchers have to add something called an adjuvant. And an adjuvant is a toxic substance like aluminum salts that creates severe localized inflammation and tissue damage at the injection site.
Ah, so you have to create a mess first.
Exactly. The context of tissue damage is the absolute prerequisite to activate the immune system. Without the damage, the immune system just doesn't care about the foreign protein.
So the damage has to come first. The building has to be falling apart before the cleanup crew is called. I mean, let's ground this in a specific real-world example from the research because this really challenges everything we're taught.
Let's look at Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Perfect. It's the most common cause of hypothyroidism in the world, right? Especially in women.
Absolutely. And the mainstream narrative says your body is attacking your thyroid gland, it's a permanent condition, your immune system is broken, and you'll just need synthetic hormones forever.
But the bioenergetic view points to a completely different timeline of the disease.
The timeline is what completely invalidates the mainstream theory. When researchers actually look at the physical progression of Hashimoto's at a cellular level, they find that massive oxidative stress and the severe depletion of glutathione always precede the immune response.
And glutathione is your body's master intracellular antioxidant, right?
Right. So the sequence of events is crucial here. The thyroid gland is a highly metabolically active organ. I mean, it requires a tremendous amount of cellular energy just to function.
It's the engine.
Yeah. So when systemic energy production fails, those thyroid cells lose the ability to maintain their antioxidant defenses. The physical tissue of the thyroid literally begins to break down and disintegrate from oxidative damage.
The structural integrity fails. The building catches fire.
The tissue deteriorates. And then, once the cells are already dying and spilling their internal contents into the extracellular space, that is when the immune system arrives to clean up the wreckage.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Right. In Hashimoto's, the autoantibodies are usually tagging an enzyme called thyroid peroxidase. Mainstream medicine says the antibodies are attacking the enzyme.
But they're really just cleaning it up.
Yes. The bioenergetic model shows the antibodies are tagging the enzyme because the dying cell has spilled it everywhere and it needs to be swept up. The immune system is merely responding to the metabolic disaster. It did not initiate the destruction.
I mean, if that's true, it completely invalidates the standard treatment protocol. If the immune system is just the cleanup crew, suppressing the immune system with heavy drugs does absolutely nothing to stop the original fire.
It just leaves the dying tissue rotting in the body.
Exactly. But this forces a massive question for you listening. If the immune system is just the cleanup crew responding to a fire, what is causing the cellular damage and the energy failure in the first place? Like, why is the thyroid or the joints or the brain catching fire?
Well, our sources point directly to ground zero. And it isn't a genetic mutation.
It's the gut.
It's the gut. The root of systemic inflammation, the spark that lights the fire, almost invariably begins with sluggish metabolism leading to poor digestion.
And we need to define metabolism here because I think a lot of people just think of it as like how fast you burn calories or whether you can eat a donut without gaining weight.
Right, it's so much more than that. Metabolism is the speed, efficiency, and heat generated by every single cellular process in your body. And it's heavily dictated by thyroid function.
So what happens when that slows down?
When someone is in a low metabolic state, essentially a cellular hypothyroid state, the very first system to slow down is the digestive tract. The stomach produces less hydrochloric acid.
The acid goes down.
Yeah, and the muscular contraction of the intestines, which is called peristalsis, they become weak and sluggish.
So the conveyor belt slows to a crawl, the food just sits there. But wait, we always have bacteria in our gut, right? Why does the food moving slowly suddenly trigger this massive autoimmune cascade?
Because of where that bacteria belongs and what it produces when it feeds. Your large intestine is supposed to be full of bacteria. That's normal.
Okay.
But your small intestine and your stomach are supposed to be relatively sterile. When stomach acid is weak, it fails to sterilize the food coming in.
Ah.
And when the transit time is incredibly slow, the bacteria from the large intestine begin to migrate upward into the small intestine. They set up camp where they shouldn't be.
This is clinically known as SIBO, right? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Exactly. So the food sits in the small intestine, it ferments, and it feeds these gram-negative bacteria.
And this is where the bacterial warfare basically begins, because these bacteria don't just live forever.
No, they have a very rapid life cycle. They divide, they eat, and they die. And when gram-negative bacteria die, their physical cell walls break apart.
And what's inside?
Well, the material that makes up their cell wall is a highly toxic substance called endotoxin, or lipopolysaccharide, usually abbreviated as LPS.
Okay, I want to pause on endotoxin for a second, because this seems to be the ultimate villain in the bioenergetic model. If we constantly have bacteria dying in our guts anyway, shouldn't we have a natural defense mechanism against this LPS? Why is it suddenly a problem now?
We do have a defense mechanism, but it requires high metabolic energy to function.
Which we just established is missing.
Exactly. In a healthy, high-energy state, your liver produces ample amounts of bile. Bile is essentially a potent biological detergent. When it's released into the intestine, it binds to endotoxin and neutralizes it, keeping it safely away from the delicate intestinal walls until you can excrete it.
But remember the context we're talking about here. We are in a state of low metabolic energy.
Right. Low thyroid function severely impairs the liver's ability to synthesize and secrete bile. So that biological detergent is completely missing.
Wow.
The SIBO is producing massive amounts of endotoxin, and without bile to neutralize it, that toxic sludge is just allowed to pool in the gut.
So we have a highly toxic bacterial waste product just pooling against the lining of the gut. And the gut lining isn't exactly a fortified brick wall, is it? I mean, it's incredibly delicate.
It is remarkably fragile. In many places, the intestinal barrier is only a single cell thick.
One cell thick?
Yeah. And those cells are held together by proteins called tight junctions. But maintaining those tight junctions requires a constant supply of cellular energy, of ATP.
And they don't have it.
Right. When endotoxin pools against these cells, and when the cells themselves are starved of ATP due to the overall low metabolic rate, those tight junctions just fail.
They give way.
They physically widen. This is the mechanical reality of what people call leaky gut.
And the sources mentioned that environmental factors can blow those tight junctions wide open too, right? Like biotoxins from mold.
Oh, absolutely. The environment plays a massive role here. Exposure to water-damaged buildings and mold biotoxins, or even severe psychological stress, it can drastically lower a protective hormone in the body called MSH.
And when MSH drops...
When MSH drops, it exacerbates that intestinal permeability. The gates are essentially just forced open.
So the gates open, and this toxic bacterial waste, this endotoxin, floods out of the digestive tract and straight into the bloodstream. I mean, this isn't just the stomach ache anymore. This is a systemic breach.
The clinical term for this is metabolic endotoxemia. Once endotoxin breaches the bloodstream, it travels via the portal vein straight to the liver.
And the liver is supposed to filter, right?
The liver is the body's primary filtration system, yes. It will desperately try to detoxify the LPS. But if the liver is already sluggish from low metabolism, it gets overwhelmed.
It just can't keep up.
It can't. The endotoxin bypasses the liver entirely and enters general systemic circulation. And the body's reaction to endotoxin in the blood is absolute evolutionary panic.
The fire alarm is pulled.
More than an alarm, honestly. The presence of endotoxin forces the entire body to instantly shift out of efficient oxidative energy production and into an emergency stress metabolism.
Like it flips a switch.
Exactly. It instantly reduces insulin sensitivity across the board, meaning your cells suddenly cannot uptake and use glucose properly. And it initiates a massive destructive inflammatory cascade that involves hormones we've really been taught to view in a completely different light.
Okay, let's trace this cascade, because this is where the bioenergetic model just completely shatters mainstream health dogma. Once that endotoxin is in the blood, it trips a series of chemical dominoes. And the very first domino involves a neurotransmitter that has incredible PR in our culture.
It really does.
When the gut lining is irritated by endotoxin, it triggers a massive release of serotonin. Now, I have to stop you here. I mean, every pharmaceutical commercial, every psychology textbook for the last 30 years tells me that serotonin is the happy brain chemical. We take SSRIs to increase it. How can the happy chemical be the first step in tissue destruction?
Well, the characterization of serotonin as a happy chemical is arguably one of the greatest biological misunderstandings of our era.
That's a strong statement.
It is, but it's true. It's true that serotonin has complex functions within the central nervous system. But 90% of the body's serotonin is not in the brain.
It's in the gut.
It is produced by the enterochromaffin cells in the gut. And in the periphery of the body, in your blood and your tissues, serotonin is not happy. It is a primary, devastating stress mediator.
Wow.
Peat extensively researched what he called serotonin sorrow. When massive amounts of serotonin are released into the bloodstream in response to endotoxin, it acts as a severe vasoconstrictor.
Vasoconstrictor, meaning it aggressively clamps down on the blood vessels.
It radically narrows the pipes. When you clamp down the blood vessels, you immediately impair blood flow to the extremities and the deep tissues.
You're cutting off the supply lines.
You drastically reduce the delivery of oxygen and vital nutrients to the cells. You are, at a microscopic level, suffocating your own tissue.
Suffocating the cells.
Yeah, and this lack of oxygen, which is hypoxia, is the ultimate trigger for cellular energy failure. The cells literally cannot produce ATP without oxygen.
So the endotoxin leaks in, it triggers serotonin, blood vessels clam shut, and the cells start gasping for air. But the dominoes don't stop there, because suffocating cells release distress signals of their own.
They absolutely do.
And that hypoxia triggers the release of another hormone that I honestly always associated strictly with women's reproductive health, and that's estrogen.
The bioenergetic understanding of estrogen is another total paradigm shift. I mean, mainstream medicine views estrogen almost exclusively as a female reproductive hormone, or something that protects bones.
Right.
But at a fundamental cellular level, for both men and women, estrogen is a primary shock hormone. It is a stress signal.
So when the tissues are gasping for air, estrogen goes up.
When tissues are subjected to hypoxia from that serotonin vasoconstriction, estrogen levels locally and systemically rise. And estrogen has a catastrophic effect on the vascular system and cellular energy.
Okay, explain the mechanism there. If serotonin is clamping the pipes shut, what is estrogen doing to them?
While serotonin constricts the vessels, estrogen attacks the permeability of the capillaries. It makes the blood vessels highly porous or leaky.
Oh, man. So fluid just leaks out.
It forces fluid to rapidly leak out of the bloodstream and pool in the surrounding extracellular tissues. This creates widespread edema, swelling.
Which explains so much inflammation.
Right. But the damage goes much deeper than just holding water weight. Estrogen actively alters the electrical gradients of the cell itself. It physically forces water and calcium into the interior of the cells.
Wait, into the cell. Why is calcium entering the cell a problem? Don't we need calcium?
We need calcium in our bones and teeth, sure, and in very tightly controlled amounts for signaling. But the interior of a healthy resting cell should have extremely low levels of calcium.
Okay.
A cell actually has to spend a massive amount of its daily energy budget operating these things called calcium pumps, just to keep calcium pushed out.
Just to keep it outside the walls.
Yes. Intracellular calcium keeps a cell in a constant, rigid state of tense excitation. When estrogen forces a flood of calcium into the cell literally cannot relax.
It's just permanently flexed.
And the mitochondria, the actual energy factories inside the cell, they become entirely overwhelmed by trying to buffer this toxic influx of calcium while simultaneously being starved of oxygen by the serotonin.
So the mitochondria just choke.
They literally choke. Their ability to create ATP grinds to an absolute halt.
So let me picture this. The cells are simultaneously suffocating from lack of blood flow, drowning in intracellular water, and hyperstimulated by calcium.
They are locked in metabolic gridlock.
And estrogen doesn't just stop there, does it?
No, it also directly acts on the immune system's mast cells, triggering them to degranulate and release massive amounts of histamine.
Histamine, so more allergies, more inflammation.
Histamine further drives the systemic inflammation and makes the blood vessels even more leaky, compounding the edema.
This triad of destruction, like serotonin, estrogen, and histamine, it really explains so much about the day-to-day symptoms of autoimmune diseases. The sources actually mention a biological parallel with sleep that just blew my mind.
Oh yes. Peat noted that sleep, particularly in older adults or those under chronic stress, it actually mirrors a state of systemic shock or inflammation.
How so?
During the night, darkness and fasting trigger a natural rise in cortisol to keep blood sugar stable. That cortisol drives up estrogen.
And we know what estrogen does.
Right. This estrogen cascade causes water to literally leave the bloodstream and enter the tissues. Your blood volume drops, the blood thickens, and your soft tissues swell with edema.
That perfectly explains why someone with rheumatoid arthritis or, even just general joint inflammation often wakes up feeling incredibly stiff and swollen and just in agony.
Exactly.
Their tissues have literally been filling with water all night due to this estrogen-driven inflammatory state. It's not that they slept wrong, their cells are waterlogged.
That is the exact mechanism. And to add another layer to this hormonal cascade, estrogen strongly promotes the release of prolactin for the pituitary gland.
Prolactin, another hormone we totally mischaracterize. We think of it purely for lactation and milk production.
Right, but prolactin levels increase naturally with age, and they spike during stress. And in a chronic stress context, prolactin literally leaches calcium out of your bones.
Wait, prolactin causes bone loss. I thought estrogen was supposed to protect bones.
That is a deeply flawed mainstream assumption based on correlation, not causation. When prolactin is elevated by estrogen, it pulls the structural calcium out of the skeletal system, directly contributing to osteopenia and osteoporosis.
Unbelievable.
But that calcium doesn't just disappear. It enters the bloodstream. And because estrogen is actively forcing calcium into the cells, that bone calcium ends up depositing in the soft tissues, the arteries, and the joints.
It turns into calcification.
Yes. It causes calcification, stiffness, and further mitochondrial failure. You are literally pulling the structural support out of your bones and shoving it into your soft tissues where it causes metabolic paralysis.
Let's look at a severe autoimmune condition to see this cascade in action because the sources detail multiple sclerosis, or MS. This is a disease where the myelin sheath, which is the protective fatty coating around your nerves, is destroyed, right? Leading to severe neurological breakdown.
Yes, exactly.
MS affects women at roughly twice the rate of men, and it usually onsets during the reproductive years. But mainstream medicine just says, well, the immune system is attacking the brain.
Which completely ignores the biochemical environment of that brain. When researchers examine the most active brain lesions in MS patients, they don't just find immune cells, they find a highly localized, estrogen-driven inflammatory firestorm.
So it's the environment, not just the cells.
MS patients consistently show very high estrogen to progesterone ratios. Their brains are flooded with mast cells releasing histamine and serotonin.
Serotonin again.
Always. Blood platelets clump together at the site of the lesion and release even more serotonin, driving extreme local hypoxia. The myelin sheath swells with edema driven by estrogen, and the cellular energy fails.
So the myelin just physically disintegrates?
It does. The immune cells that arrive later are simply there to scavenge the broken pieces of myelin. They did not start the fire. The endotoxin, serotonin, and estrogen cascade did.
It's terrifying when you lay it out sequentially like that. But here is where we have to talk about the accelerant. Because this entire inflammatory cascade, the leaky gut, the endotoxin, the serotonin vasoconstriction, the estrogen swelling, it's poured like highly combustible gasoline on a fire by one specific ubiquitous dietary ingredient.
We are talking about the ultimate dietary saboteur.
Polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs, seed oils.
Canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil.
The very fats that mainstream nutrition, the American Heart Association, and agricultural subsidies have spent the last 50 years aggressively promoting as heart-healthy alternatives to saturated animal fats.
From a bioenergetic standpoint, the massive influx of PUFAs into the human diet is the primary driver of the modern autoimmune and chronic disease epidemic.
I really need to understand the physics of this because it's so hard to unlearn decades of polyunsaturated equals good. I'm trying to visualize the cell membrane here. If I build my cell out of these fats, what is actually happening? Is it like trying to build a brick wall using wet clay that never hardens?
Well, the wet clay analogy captures the lack of structural integrity, but it doesn't really capture the danger.
Okay, what's a better way to look at it?
It's more like building your cell membranes out of highly combustible dynamite that is constantly sweating nitroglycerin.
Okay, that is a terrifying image.
To understand why, you have to look at the basic biochemistry of the fat molecule itself. Polyunsaturated means the carbon chain of the fat has multiple double bonds. And in chemistry, a double bond is an area of missing hydrogen electrons. It is structurally fragile and highly reactive.
Okay, so it's a fragile molecule. Why do plants even make them?
They serve a vital purpose for the plant. PUFAs are liquid at very cold temperatures. If you are a plant seed sitting in the freezing dirt during winter, you must incorporate fats into your structure that stay fluid, otherwise you would just freeze solid and die.
It's biological antifreeze.
Exactly. But human beings are not plant seeds in winter. We are warm-blooded mammals operating at roughly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
So we take this cold weather biological antifreeze, we consume massive quantities of it, and we put it inside a hot, highly oxygenated human body.
It is a profound biological mismatch. At human body temperature, and in the constant presence of oxygen from our blood, those fragile double bonds in the PUFA molecules break apart rapidly.
They just fall apart.
They undergo a violent chemical reaction called lipid peroxidation. They quite literally go rancid and rot inside your living tissues.
Rotting inside the body.
Yes. And when they oxidize, they break down into highly toxic, chaotic byproducts called ALEs, which are advanced lipid oxidation end products, and AXLAMs.
And what do these toxic byproducts actually do to the cell once they break down?
They directly assault the mitochondria. The inner membrane of your mitochondria contains a very specific fat called cardiolipin, which is absolutely essential for the electron transport chain to function.
So it's part of the engine.
It's crucial to the engine. And oxidized PUFA fragments destroy cardiolipin. They blow up the machinery that produces ATP.
Oh.
So not only is the cell being choked of oxygen by serotonin and flooded with calcium by estrogen, but the physical factory that makes the energy is being blown apart by rancid seed oils. It guarantees total cellular energy failure.
And the damage doesn't even stop at the mitochondria. The sources highlight that PUFAs cause direct, measurable damage to the immune system itself.
Peat frequently highlighted a shocking application of these oils in mainstream medicine. If a patient receives an organ transplant, the doctors need to severely suppress the patient's immune system so it doesn't reject the organ.
Right, immunosuppression.
One of the ways they achieve this historically, and sometimes still do in lipid emulsions, is by intravenously administering vegetable oils. They use PUFAs specifically as immunosuppressants, because polyunsaturated fats directly kill white blood cells.
Wait, they use the quote-unquote heart-healthy cooking oil as a medical-grade immune suppressant? That is insane.
It gets worse. PUFAs cause profound structural damage to the thymus gland.
Remind me what the thymus does.
The thymus is essentially the master training camp for the immune system. It's where T cells go to mature and learn how to distinguish between healthy native tissue and dangerous debris.
It's where they get their targeting data.
Exactly. If the thymus is destroyed by lipid peroxidation from seed oils, the body loses its immune intelligence.
It goes blind.
The researcher Hans Selye found that the more damaged the thymus gland became, the more likely the body was to produce autoimmune cells that lacked proper targeting.
So PUFAs are simultaneously destroying the cellular energy grid and blinding the immune system's regulatory center.
Yes.
And bringing it full circle back to the gut, our sources point out that PUFAs actually feed the endotoxin cycle that started this whole mess.
Yes. PUFAs are potent inhibitors of proteolytic enzymes. Those are the enzymes your stomach and pancreas produce to digest protein.
Oh, so you can't even break your food down.
Right. So if you are consuming a diet high in seed oils, you literally cannot digest your food properly. That undigested protein ferments in the gut, feeds the SIBO, produces more endotoxin, and the cycle just accelerates.
It just spins faster.
Furthermore, the oxidized PUFA fragments directly attack the gut lining, physically widening the tight junctions and guaranteeing that more of that endotoxin leaks into the blood.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the terrifying picture we've painted so far. We have sluggish digestion leading to bacterial overgrowth. That overgrowth produces toxic endotoxin, which leaks through a gut lining that has been severely weakened by rancid seed oils.
Right.
The endotoxin hits the blood, triggering a massive release of serotonin from the gut, which clamps the blood vessels shut and chokes off oxygen. The suffocating cells trigger estrogen, which floods the cells with water and toxic calcium, while prolactin steals calcium from the bones.
It's the perfect storm.
And inside the cell, the delicate POFAs are oxidizing from the heat and blowing up the mitochondrial energy factories. The result is total catastrophic cellular energy failure. The physical tissues break down, and the immune system swoops in to tag the wreckage.
That is the exact mechanical anatomy of an autoimmune disease under the bioenergetic model.
So, if this is all an energy crisis, what happens to the body's master energy engine, the thyroid, when all of this is occurring? Because we know autoimmunity and thyroid issues are deeply, inextricably linked.
They are inseparable because autoimmunity is fundamentally a thyroid problem.
Okay.
The thyroid gland is the metabolic control center. It acts like the master thermostat for the entire body.
But mainstream medicine looks at hypothyroidism, low thyroid function, as just a localized disease of a single gland. Like you take a pill, your blood numbers look okay, and you're supposedly cured.
But in the bioenergetic model, hypothyroidism is not a localized disease. It is the systemic physical state of low cellular energy that disables the entire body's ability to heal and function.
And this is where the research from Feldman and Peat introduces a concept that completely breaks the mainstream endocrinology model. They talk about cellular hypothyroidism.
Yes.
Can you explain how a patient can go to their doctor, get their blood drawn, have the doctor tell them their thyroid hormone levels are perfectly normal, but they are actually starving for thyroid hormone at the microscopic level?
This is perhaps the most critical misunderstanding in modern endocrinology. When your thyroid gland produces hormone, it mostly produces T4.
Okay.
T4 is a pro-hormone. It is biologically inactive, has to travel through the bloodstream, enter into your cells, and be converted by your liver and other tissues into T3.
T3 being the active form.
Right. T3 is the active hormone that actually enters the nucleus of the cell, turns on the mitochondria, and commands the cell to produce energy. But here is the catch that mainstream medicine ignores.
Yeah.
Getting that inactive T4 into the cell requires energy.
Wait, why can't it just float through the cell membrane?
Because the cell membrane transporters that carry thyroid hormone inside are ATP dependent. They require cellular energy to operate.
Oh, wow. So if the cell is already out of energy.
If your cells are already depleted of ATP because they were choked by serotonin, flooded by estrogen, and blown up by POFAs, the cell literally does not have the energy required to open the door and let the T4 inside.
Wow. So the hormone is just floating in the blood, knocking on a locked door.
Exactly. The doctor draws your blood, sees plenty of T4 circulating, and declares, hey, your thyroid is perfectly fine. But inside the cell, where the actual metabolism happens, there is a total famine.
The cells are starving in a sea of plenty.
They cannot convert T4 to T3. And when cells are deprived of that active T3 signal, they cannot maintain their structure. They swell with water and sodium, they lose their delicate electrical gradients, and they begin to physically disintegrate.
This is why people with normal blood work still suffer from severe hypothyroid symptoms, right? Like hair loss, dry skin, chronic constipation, brain fog, depression, cold hands and feet.
Because every single cell in their body is struggling to survive in a low-energy state.
Which brings us to the fascinating work of Dr. Broda Barnes, and what the sources refer to as the 98.6 degree Fahrenheit lie. We have all been taught since childhood that the normal human body temperature is 98.6 degrees. But that's not actually true anymore, is it?
No, 98.6 is a historical artifact. Dr. Broda Barnes spent decades treating patients not based on their blood work, but based on their waking body temperature.
Why temperature?
He recognized that body temperature is the ultimate, undeniable physical readout of your cellular metabolic rate. If your cells are producing energy efficiently, they produce heat as a byproduct.
And what's happened to our heat?
Well, recent data from a massive Stanford University study confirmed what bioenergetic researchers have been saying for years. The average human body temperature has dropped a full degree Fahrenheit since the Industrial Revolution.
The full degree. That is a population-wide cooling. We are literally colder than our ancestors.
It represents a society-wide collapse of metabolic rate, driven by the mass introduction of seed oils, the destruction of our food supply, and chronic environmental stress. The modern human is averaging closer to 97.6 degrees today.
So when your waking temperature is hovering around 97 degrees,
Your body is essentially operating in a state of semi-hibernation. The biochemical reality of being cold is severe. Your metabolic enzymes, your neurotransmitters, and your white blood cells are highly temperature dependent.
they need heat to work.
At 97 degrees, they are quite literally too cold to function optimally. Biochemical reactions slow down. Your immune system moves like it's walking through molasses.
And there is a fascinating respiratory component to this low-energy hibernating state. The sources highlight the CO2 secret. I mean, we've been taught our whole lives that oxygen is good, and carbon dioxide is just toxic exhaust waste that we need to expel from our bodies as fast as possible.
We treat it like it's purely a waste gas.
But the bioenergetic model reveals that CO2 is actually the metabolic key that unlocks oxygen for the cells.
This is based on fundamental physiology known as the Bohr effect, discovered by Christian Bohr back in 1904.
So this isn't new science.
Not at all. Hemoglobin is the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen from your lungs to your tissues. But hemoglobin will not readily release that oxygen payload to the cells unless there is an adequate concentration of carbon dioxide present in the local tissue.
Wait, really?
Yes, CO2 physically changes the shape of the hemoglobin molecule, forcing it to drop the oxygen so the cell can actually use it.
Wait, so if I don't have enough carbon dioxide in my tissues, the oxygen just stays trapped in my blood?
Yes, and this is where chronic stress becomes devastating. If you are chronically stressed or in an endotoxin-driven panic state, you are almost certainly hyperventilating.
Breathing too fast.
You're breathing slightly too fast, often through your open mouth, especially at night. And when you hyperventilate, you blow off too much CO2.
You exhale all of it.
Your blood becomes slightly alkaline. And because you lack that vital CO2, your hemoglobin holds onto the oxygen with a death grip. Your blood is fully oxygenated. It circulates right past your starving tissues, but it never drops the oxygen off.
Let me do an experiment with you, the listener, right now. Try this. Just take a normal, relaxed breath in through your nose. Let it out normally. Now pinch your nose and hold your breath.
Start counting the seconds.
Yeah, how long can you comfortably hold your breath before your brain sends a strong, panicky signal that you need air? If you can't comfortably make it past 20 or 30 seconds, it's not because you lack oxygen. It's because your body is hypersensitive to the buildup of CO2.
Exactly.
You are likely overbreathing all day long, constantly blowing off CO2, and therefore starving your cells of oxygen, which suppresses your thyroid even further.
It creates a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. The stress of modern life causes hyperventilation. Hyperventilation lowers CO2. Low CO2 prevents oxygen delivery, causing cellular hypoxia.
And we know what hypoxia does.
The hypoxia triggers the release of estrogen and lactic acid, which causes further systemic stress and inflammation. Without CO2, the oxidative fire in the mitochondria goes out, and the cell is forced to rely on inefficient, highly stressful emergency pathways just to survive.
Okay, if the body is trapped in this cycle, if cortisol, estrogen, endotoxin, and a lack of oxygen are literally shredding our tissues due to this massive energy crisis, how does anyone survive? The body must have some sort of internal defense mechanism to protect the tissues while it tries to fix the energy problem, right? We need a shield.
We do have a shield. Ray Peat extensively studied what he called the youth hormones, or the protective anti-stress hormones.
Weshar.
Pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. These steroids act as the body's natural shock absorbers.
Okay, how do they work?
In a healthy, robust metabolic system, when you encounter a stressor, whether it's endotoxin, starvation, or psychological trauma, your adrenal glands release cortisol.
Which is a stress hormone.
Yes. And cortisol is highly catabolic. Its job is to rapidly break down your muscle tissue, your bone, and your thymus gland, converting that tissue into glucose so your brain has the emergency fuel it needs to survive the stressor.
It literally eats the body to feed the brain.
Exactly. But in youth, that massive cortisol spike is supposed to be immediately followed by a protective flood of pregnenolone, DHEA, and progesterone.
The cavalry arrives.
These protective hormones rush into the tissues and act as anti-glucocorticoids. They essentially tell the cortisol, okay, you've dissolved enough muscle, you've raised the blood sugar, the emergency is managed, now stop shredding the tissues.
They block the destructive effects of the stress response.
They do.
But there is a massive catch. The sources talk about the age 35 cliff. What happens to this protective shield as we get older?
Well, until our mid-30s, this protective system usually works beautifully, assuming the diet isn't entirely saturated with PUFAs. This is why people in their 20s can eat garbage, sleep poorly, and still seem incredibly resilient to stress.
Youth really is wasted on the young.
But around age 35, as metabolic rate naturally begins to slow down, the body's ability to synthesize those secondary protective hormones, pregnenolone and progesterone, it drops off a cliff.
It just plummets.
However, the production of cortisol does not decline. cortisol stays chronically high because it is absolutely essential for keeping blood sugar elevated. Without it, you would slip into a hypoglycemic coma and die.
So after 35, the primary stress hormone that actively dissolves your muscles, thins your skin, leaches your bones, and destroys your thymus gland is still pumping at full volume, but the shield is gone.
The emergency brake is cut.
The tissues are left completely defenseless against the cortisol and estrogen firestorm.
That is precisely the age when we see the explosion of autoimmune disease diagnoses and the rapid, visible acceleration of physical aging. And this really highlights the incredible, often profoundly misunderstood superpowers of progesterone.
I want to focus on progesterone because this is another paradigm shift. We have been completely conditioned by mainstream medicine to view progesterone strictly as a pregnancy hormone. It's right there in the name, progestation.
It's treated like a niche female hormone.
We're told it's just for the menstrual cycle and making babies, but the bioenergetic model says it's actually the ultimate anti-stress armor for both men's and women's brains and immune systems.
The bias in naming it has severely crippled our medical understanding of its true function. Progesterone is the fundamental hormone of cellular adaptation. It is the perfect biochemical opponent to estrogen.
How does it oppose it?
Where estrogen promotes the uptake of water and toxic calcium into the cell, causing severe edema and excitatory stress, progesterone pushes the water out, manages the calcium, and calms the cell down.
It's the ultimate chill pill for the cell.
It actively prevents the lipid peroxidation of those fragile PUFAs we discussed earlier. It protects the brain against excitotoxicity from neurotransmitters like glutamate. It actively promotes the production of myelin by the glial cells in the brain.
Which is why it's so overwhelmingly crucial for repairing conditions like multiple sclerosis.
Exactly.
And it actually stops the body from synthesizing more estrogen, right? It cuts off the supply.
Yes, progesterone strongly downregulates the aromatase enzyme. Aromatase is the enzyme found in fat tissue that converts androgens, like testosterone, into estrogen. Progesterone blocks that conversion.
It blocks the conversion entirely.
Amazingly, while pharmaceutical corticosteroids like prednisone are used to suppress the immune system in autoimmune patients, causing terrible side effects like osteoporosis, skin thinning, and diabetes.
Progesterone does the opposite.
Progesterone provides powerful anti-inflammatory benefits without the toxicity. In fact, it reverses skin aging and actively builds bone density. It is the ultimate restorative hormone.
This brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this deep dive. If the mainstream medical model is fundamentally wrong about the cause of autoimmunity, like blaming the immune cleanup crew instead of the massive cellular energy failure, then they are definitely catastrophically wrong about the treatment.
Oh, they are completely missing the mark.
Mainstream medicine relies almost entirely on heavy immunosuppressants. They prescribe corticosteroids, powerful biologics, and chemotherapy drugs to literally poison the immune system into submission.
And while those highly toxic drugs might stop the immune system from tagging the debris, which provides the patient with temporary symptom relief, they do absolutely nothing to stop the underlying energy failure.
Because the fire is still burning?
The cells are still suffocating from serotonin. The gut is still leaking endotoxin. The PUFAs are still oxidizing and destroying the mitochondria. You are essentially just shooting the fire alarm while the building burns to the ground.
And in the process of suppressing the immune system, you guarantee severe long-term complications.
Catastrophic systemic infections, rapid bone loss, and accelerated metabolic aging.
So how do we actually reverse this? How do we use the bioenergetic protocol to rebuild the cellular power grids, reignite the thyroid, and naturally shift the body out of this destructive autoimmune state? Because the protocol detailed in our sources is the exact opposite of what most health influencers recommend today.
It really is. The bioenergetic protocol requires a complete psychological paradigm shift away from extreme dietary restriction and punishment and a move towards deep, intentional cellular nourishment.
Nourishment, not deprivation.
It is entirely focused on providing the raw materials needed to restore metabolic rate and maximize cellular energy production.
Okay, let's break this down into actionable steps.
Yeah.
First, based on everything we've learned about the metabolic firestorm,
Right.
what do we need to aggressively remove from our lives?
Number one is absolute. You must eliminate polyunsaturated fatty acids.
Is seed oils?
You have to remove the seed oils, canola, soy, corn, sunflower, but also commercial nuts, seeds, and even high doses of fish oils, which are highly unstable.
Because they're the fragile dynamite.
Remember, these are the structurally fragile fats that oxidize at body temperature, destroy your mitochondria, and physically poison the thymus gland. Removing PUFAs stops the daily accumulation of combustible material in your tissues.
And how long does that take to clear out?
The half-life of PUFAs in your fat tissue is roughly 600 days.
600 days.
So this requires long-term commitment. It's not a quick fix.
Wow. Okay, what's next?
Number 2, you must stop fasting and stop severe calorie restriction.
Oh, that is going to be wildly controversial. I mean, fasting is incredibly popular right now. Every health guru talks about fasting for gut healing and triggering autophagy to clean out the cells.
Fasting provides short-term symptom relief in autoimmune patients for one simple reason. You are temporarily stopping the intake of food that might be poorly digested and feeding the gut bacteria.
Less food equals less endotoxin in the short term.
Exactly. But fasting is a massive systemic stressor. When you stop eating, you drastically lower cellular energy. To survive the fast, the body is forced to pump out huge amounts of cortisol to dissolve your own muscle and thymus tissue to maintain blood glucose.
So it's catabolic.
Very. Fasting actively suppresses the active T3 thyroid hormone. Long-term, fasting deeply entrenches the exact hypothyroid low-energy state that caused the autoimmunity in the first place. You cannot starve a cold, energy-depleted body into healing.
This isn't about managing symptoms by starving yourself. It's about giving your cells the exact raw materials they need to turn the lights back on and rebuild the house. So if we aren't fasting and eating salads with seed oil dressing, what do we add?
You need to consume highly stable, protective fats. Saturated fats like high-quality butter, coconut oil, and beef tallow.
Stable fats.
Unlike PUFAs, saturated fats have no double bonds. They do not oxidize or go rancid at human body temperature. They provide incredibly stable fuel for the cell, and they actually have a protective antimicrobial effect, helping to bind and detoxify endotoxins in the gut.
That is totally backwards from what we're told. Okay, what else?
Next, and equally controversially, you need adequate, easily digestible carbohydrates.
Again, pushing aggressively against the mainstream low-carb and keto craze. Why are carbohydrates so critical for reversing an autoimmune crisis?
Because your liver must have abundant stored glycogen, which only comes from carbohydrates, in order to convert the inactive T4 thyroid hormone into the active T3 hormone.
Oh, right, the conversion process.
A starving liver on a low-carb diet simply cannot make that conversion efficiently. The active T3 plummets. Stress hormones rise to compensate, and cellular energy fails. You need carbohydrates from highly digestible sources.
Like what?
Ripe fruits, pure honey, and well-cooked root vegetables. And you must space them evenly throughout the day, pairing them with high-quality protein to keep your blood sugar perfectly stable. Stable blood sugar is the key to keeping the stress hormone cortisol constantly suppressed.
What about lifestyle interventions? We talked about the CO2 secret and how overbreathing suffocates the cells.
You have to deliberately fix your breathing mechanics. The goal is nasal breathing exclusively, day and night. Many people in the bioenergetic community use specialized surgical tape over their mouths at night to enforce nasal breathing while they sleep.
Mouth taping.
Yes, this physically stops the hyperventilation. It allows CO2 levels in the blood to rise, which engages the Bohr effect, finally forcing hemoglobin to release its grip and push oxygen deep into those starving hypoxic tissues.
Okay, that's a physical intervention. Anything else?
You also need to heavily utilize light as a metabolic nutrient.
Light therapy. Because light actually physically interacts with the mitochondria, right? How does that work?
Fascinating quantum biology, really. Sunlight, and specifically concentrated red and near-infrared light therapy, can penetrate deep through the skin and directly stimulate a specific enzyme in the mitochondrial electron transport chain called cytochrome C oxidase.
It's like photosynthesis for humans.
Sort of, yes. Red light acts almost exactly like the active T3 thyroid hormone. It physically kickstarts the cellular engine, increases the consumption of oxygen, and drastically ramps up ATP production while lowering inflammation.
And how do you know if any of this is actually working? If the blood tests for thyroid hormone are misleading, as we said, how do you know if your metabolism is truly healing and generating energy?
You don't guess, and you don't rely solely on a TSH blood test. You track your waking body temperature and your resting pulse.
The temperature and pulse.
These are the ultimate, undeniable functional tests of your metabolic rate. When your cells start producing energy efficiently, they generate physical heat.
Like an engine firing back up.
As you heal your gut, remove the PUFAs, and lower your stress hormones, you will literally watch your waking temperature climb from the low 97s back up toward that optimal, vibrant 98.6 degrees. And your pulse should settle into a strong, relaxed 75 to 90 beats per minute after a balanced meal.
Finally, let's talk about the supplemental shield. Once the diet, the light, and the breathing are dialed in, how can we accelerate the healing and protect the tissues while the metabolism is still recovering?
The bioenergetic approach utilizes specific compounds that support oxidative energy and actively oppose the stress cascade. Aspirin is a fascinating one.
Wait, like the regular over-the-counter painkiller?
Yes, we think of it as a cheap headache pill, but it is a potent metabolic intervention. Aspirin is a profound anti-inflammatory that actively opposes the toxic oxidative effects of PUFAs and inhibits the formation of inflammatory prostaglandins.
That's incredible. What about vitamins?
Fat-soluble vitamins are absolutely crucial. Vitamin E directly neutralizes the lipid peroxidation of seed oils inside the cell membrane and actively opposes the toxic effects of estrogen.
The anti-estrogen vitamin.
Right. Vitamins A and D work synergistically to rebuild the physical barrier immunity in the gut lining and the skin. Vitamin K protects the bones from the calcium leaching effects of prolactin and significantly lowers inflammation in the joints.
And for those who are severely depleted, who have been running on cortisol for decades, the sources mention the careful, supervised use of the protective hormones themselves.
Yes, replacing the missing shield. The cautious use of physiological doses of pregnenolone, progesterone, or DHEA can provide immediate, powerful anti-stress armor.
It just gives the body a break.
It stops the cortisol from destroying the tissues and allows the cells a moment to breathe and repair. And for some, utilizing desiccated thyroid glandulars or Cure T3 hormone can be the exact metabolic spark needed to pull them out of cellular hibernation.
But that has to be done carefully, right?
Extremely. These must be used with tremendous respect and ideally under knowledgeable supervision because you are turning the cellular engines back on. You are increasing the metabolic RPM.
And you need gas in the tank to rev the engine.
The body must have the nutritional fuel, the carbs, the fats, the vitamins, to support that increased engine speed, or you will just create more stress.
Let's bring this all together for you, the listener. If you are struggling with chronic health issues, the most important, empowering concept to internalize today is that your body is not broken. Your immune system is not your enemy.
It's just trying to save you.
It is the exhausted, overwhelmed cleanup crew responding to a metabolic disaster. Leaky guts, bacterial endotoxin, the toxic breakdown of seed oils, and the suffocating cascade of serotonin and estrogen have systematically shut down your cellular power grids.
The energy is gone.
Your tissues are breaking down from a fundamental lack of energy, and your immune system is just desperately trying to manage the wreckage.
But there's a way out.
There is. By intentionally fueling your thyroid with stable saturated fats, abundant carbohydrates, restorative CO2, and protective hormones, you can reignite that metabolic fire. You can restore your body heat, rebuild the cellular power grids, and naturally shift out of the autoimmune state.
And if autoimmunity is simply the physical manifestation of chronic energy failure, well, it raises a profoundly important question for all of us. Is what we casually call normal aging, the wrinkles, the cognitive decline, the frailty, the chronic joint pain, is it just a slow-motion, decades-long autoimmune reaction to a gradually cooling metabolism?
That is a staggering thought.
And if so, how much of that inevitable aging can we actually reverse just by turning the cellular thermostat back up?
That is the ultimate question we want to leave you with to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this incredible capstone deep dive into the bioenergetic model. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to understanding the microscopic power grids inside your own cells. Until next time, keep your metabolism burning bright.